and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Monica Wheaton. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success here at ECI for the Residential Home Construction Division. I'm really excited to be here today. We've got my friend Lisa Armstrong here who's going to be doing our presentation. Just wanted to give you a few logistics before we get started. Again, this isn't Teams or Zoom, which is one you might be more familiar with. We are on GoToWebinar. It is a little bit different in that we do not have a chat function, but we do have a questions box. So if during the presentation, if you have any questions or anything you want to comment on, you're more than welcome to pull out that side control panel, type your question or comment into the questions box below, and we will monitor those throughout the presentation. And if it's a point of clarification, we'll ask it at that time. Otherwise, we'll save it to the end. We will have a couple poll questions during the presentation today, and so when those come up, we do ask you to participate because we love to hear how our audience is doing and where your guys' heads are at, so we can make sure we're giving you the best presentation that we can. And then we are also recording, and so we really encourage you. This is some great content we're going to be covering today, so we really encourage you to listen in. Once we finish the webinar, we will send you a follow-up email. There'll be a link to the recording, and we encourage you to listen to it again or share it with some of your team members so they can also hear some of this content. And yeah, that would be great. We'll also post it on our YouTube channel. So I think those are the logistics. If you have any problems or questions, you can always email me, mwheaton@ecisolutions.com, and we'll make sure you get what you need to get set up for listening in. And that's about it. So we'll go ahead and get started. So today's webinar is Leading Through Change, How to Keep Teams Aligned in Agile. And I have with us Lisa Armstrong. So Lisa is a wonderful trainer who actually worked with ECI for many years, and she's done a lot of training of our sales teams and management teams and things like that, and is now out on her own and a company doing some leadership training. And I'll actually let Lisa introduce herself and then get started with the session. Are you ready to go, Lisa?
I am ready. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Monica, and thank you, Terrell, for having me. I am really excited to be here with everybody today to talk about change. I mean, man, if we're going through so much change on a daily basis, I think this is one of those webinars that we can all benefit from personally and professionally. So as Monica said, I actually was with ECI for about 9 years, and I have lost my mouse. There we go. I was with ECI for about 9 years as the head of global learning and development. And I decided about 6 months ago to go out on my own and start a business called Launchpad Leadership. And my passion really is helping the small to mid-sized business with their people development. As many of you know, a lot of companies don't have big HR teams, and they don't have L&D and training. So my goal and my passion is really to help support small to mid-sized businesses who just need an extra set of hands for some practical, easy to implement leadership and people skills and training. So very excited to be with you today. I thought I would just start with a statistic, and if you look on ChatGPT or Google, man, there's thousands of statistics on the impact of change. And really, we've got so much change going on today that Wiley found in today's environment, about 67% of employees expect constant change. We've just become conditioned to it. The challenge with that is that 35%, so if you think of 10 employees, at least 3 within your company are also reporting severe stress associated with change. And it's not surprising, right? When we throw a lot of different dynamics, whether it's economic or AI and the shift in how we do business, of course it's going to cause stress. So today, it's really about giving you just some practical tools and information that can really help you, whether you lead a team or maybe you are an informal leader at your company, really helping one another, helping yourself manage through change, but also helping those that you work with as well. And I like to just share this curve. You might have seen this before, but this is the change curve. So anytime a significant change happens, we're going to work the curve. Now, how we work the curve is dependent upon a lot of things. Some of us are more risk tolerant, and we may adapt to changes faster just naturally. It might be how we're wired. If the change impacts me drastically, I might get stuck in the shock or denial phase longer. If I don't feel that I have clear communication or support, I might get stuck in that early part of the curve. But everybody works the curve. So today, what we're hoping to do is to give you some practical tools that allow you to kind of help the employees get through that denial, frustration, depression stage faster, to where they can actually go to acceptance and curiosity and willing to embrace some of the changes that are happening at your organization. And if you have ever studied or been a part of learning about the grief curve, this is what's really interesting. The grief curve mirrors almost identically the change curve. And the reason I bring this up is because if somebody loses a loved one or they're experiencing substantial grief, we would never expect them to go from denial to acceptance in a matter of days. But yet in the business world, sometimes we expect people just to get over it and get on board quickly. And we're not recognizing that there's a curve and there's things that I can do to help people navigate that curve more effectively. Many of us are not going to go from shock and denial straight to acceptance and commitment without a little help, right? We're going to need some communication, we're going to need some training, we're going to need some support. So often as leaders, we might learn about a change a lot sooner than the rest of our team, and we're already over on the right side of the curve. But we've got to remember, some people may just be learning about the change or experiencing it at a different time, and they may be way back on that left side. So it's just that understanding that people are going to be at different parts of the curve at different time. All of us experience change differently and at different paces. If a change doesn't affect me very much, I'm probably going to move to acceptance relatively quickly. If I've had a negative history of change where I've had a few big ones that have not gone well, I may be more risk adverse. So all of those things we need to take into consideration as we roll out changes at our organization. So we're going to do our first poll. So Terrell, if you'll launch this poll for us, I'd be really curious to hear, just at your organization, where do you see people getting stuck? What part of the curve do you see people getting stuck? Denial, like I'm just not going to accept it. Anger and resistance, I'm going to dig in my heels and just not be willing. Or curiosity, hey, I'm asking questions, I'm trying to understand, I may not be totally bought in, but I'm at least curious. So once everybody's had a chance to respond, I'll have Terrell report back our findings here.
So we're about 75% anger resistance and 25% curiosity.
Okay. Thank you guys for that. And you know what? That is not surprising. Where a lot of people get stuck is that, man, no, I don't like it. I don't like it. It's not what I would have done. It's not what I wanted. And that can really be a significant barrier. The good news is the two main things we're going to talk about today will help you work with people to get them through that part of the curve. So a couple of interesting facts. If you look at a lot of research that cites where do change initiatives fail, rarely is it because of the process itself. It's usually because of the people side of change. Failure to get people bought in, failure to have clarity in what we're doing and why we're doing it, failure to have a clear understanding of how people need to be a part of the process and not just assuming everybody will figure it out. So this is where most change initiatives fail. And some recent research from ProSci. So a lot of what I'm talking about today is based on the work of ProSci. If you Google this or type it into ChatGPT, you'll find lots of great references. And we're going to provide you some materials at the end of today as well. But recent research finds that employee engagement is among the top 3 contributors to successful change. So how well we do at getting our employees bought in and engaged with the change is really going to be a significant factor in if the change sticks or not. So when you look at other research that's been done, who do people want to hear from? When a change is being rolled out across the organization, who do they want to hear from? Well, the answer is Everybody. They need to hear it consistently, frequently, and from many levels of the organization. And what's really interesting is if you look at company-wide changes, people expect to hear from the president, the CEO, the executive team. But when it comes to changes that affect how I do my job on a day-to-day basis, people expect to hear from their direct supervisor. And I'm just going to pause here for a second because I think this is a common mistake that I've seen is, the change is announced from the top and we don't get frontline leaders to understand it, to explain it, to advocate for it. And that's where it can fall. Because if we haven't done a good job of cascading that communication so that frontline supervisor also feels confident talking about it, then we're really set up for failure, because that's who your employees expect to hear from. That's who knows them best, their manager and the people that are working with them every day. So it's really important as we talk about some of the concepts today that it doesn't just come from the top, but that we really arm all of our leaders to have these types of conversations. So it's about facilitating change on an individual level. It doesn't usually work if we take a blanket approach because everybody's going to experience things differently. So the model we're going to review with you today that I have found very, very helpful in change management is called ADKAR. And there's a people side and a process side. Well, because we already talked about most changes fail because a lack of people getting on board, we're going to really hone in on the people side of change. If you look at the top of the arrow, you'll see awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. These are the 5 steps to ADKAR, which is the people side of change. Because we only have less than an hour today, we're really going to hone in on awareness and desire in more detail, and then we'll touch briefly on knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. One thing I'd like to call out here, you notice the gradient change from kind of a light to a dark going left to right. That's really to signify the linear approach that needs to be taken. So when we roll out any change, we must start with awareness. Then we move to desire. These 2 things need to happen before we move to knowledge and training. And here's another common mistake that I've seen. A change gets rolled out and we say, okay, what training do we need to make sure people know how to do it? Maybe I'm implementing new software or I'm implementing a new program. And we move straight to the training phase and we forget about the awareness and desire. Well, typically when we do that, that training is going to fall flat because people aren't bought in. They don't know why we're doing it. They don't see the significance, and they can very easily dismiss it. So if I don't go in order, if I don't start with awareness and desire, my training initiatives are going to fall flat and probably fail. So that's why we really wanted to emphasize awareness and desire today, because those are critical for setting the tone, and they're the most important at getting over that anger and resistance phase as well. So the first A of ADKAR is awareness. And this is the why, not just the what. So another common mistake that I've seen is that we do a really good job of telling people what's changing, and we may even expand on that and tell them how to do it, but we skip the why. And the why are we changing and why are we changing now are very, very important. You may say, well, why? I don't understand why that's so important. It speaks to a totally different part of your brain. So I know I got a little geeky on this slide with you, but I'll kind of summarize it with this. If you watch Super Bowl commercials during the Super Bowl, you'll notice every single one of those commercials aims at the limbic brain, your emotional brain, right? We don't really learn about the quality of the products. We don't learn about the ingredients. Those Super Bowl commercials try to make us laugh or make us cry, right? The Clydesdales is a good example. They're connecting to emotion. The reason companies spend millions of dollars on commercials that connect to emotion is because it drives behavior. So when we're talking about a change within our organization, I need to say what's changing. I need to be clear with the what, but I absolutely need to connect to the why. Why does it matter? Why is this going to help us get to the next level as a company? What's at risk if we don't change? Why is this vision part of our story? Why is it important that people get on board? If we skip the why, we are not speaking to the limbic part of the brain. We're only speaking to the thinking brain. And the thinking brain reasons with logic and data, but the emotional brain is what drives us to motivation. So one thing I would encourage you as you're kind of thinking about your communication of change is making sure the why is really, really clear, and not assuming that frontline managers, maybe a little bit lower in the organization, understand the why. We need to make sure we have those conversations so that we can really sell the why, get people bought into the vision, bought into the bigger picture, not just the tactics of what we're doing differently. So we have another poll. We'd love to get some more feedback from you. If you think about the last time your company went through a significant change, how often was that change communicated to the employees? Would you say, hey, we heard about it once, maybe 2 to 3 times, more than 3 times, or you know what? I don't know that it was ever formally communicated. Thank you for participating.
Maybe 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. And we got a tie here. We got 40%. I don't think it was ever formally communicated. 40%, maybe 2 to 3 times, and then 20% once.
Okay. Thank you guys for your honesty. And these results are not surprising at all. When we think about, again, going back to research, how often should we communicate change? Well, ProSci, the same company I just referenced, they've done a lot of research on this. In general, companies are under communicating by 3 to 5 times. So the way our brains work, especially in today's noisy environment, there's so much clutter, there's so much coming at us. I mean, communication overload has never been higher. If employees don't hear a consistent message 7 to 10 times, the likelihood of it sticking is low. And the reason for that is, look at that last statistic, your brain is filtering out 80 to 90% of incoming information as noise. So this also speaks to the importance of the consistency in the message. The why needs to be consistent. The what needs to be consistent. If I'm hearing different versions of it across the organization, that's going to get filtered out as noise. So as leaders in your company, getting everybody on board with the why and the what is so important, and not ever assuming you've said it too many times. And I think this statistic is a really powerful one, 7 to 10 exposures before it really sticks. Now that can be in a variety of delivery, right? That could be email, town halls, one-on-ones with the team meetings. It can take a variety of forms, but I think the takeaway here is it needs to be frequent and it needs to be consistent. So a couple other best practices when communicating change. One of the things we don't want to happen is to hurt our credibility when we're communicating change. Sometimes the tendency could be a little bit Pollyanna-ish. Oh, it's going to be great. Everything's going to be great. You know, this is wonderful. And that can sometimes hurt our credibility, because for many changes, especially if you're implementing new software or you've got a new program or something substantial, an AI initiative that you're rolling out, there's going to be bumps in the road, right? There's going to be challenges. There's going to be setbacks. It's going to probably take more time. So in order to maintain high credibility, we want to be honest about the gains, but we also want to be honest about, hey guys, this will slow us down for the next 6 months, or we know we're going to have to take more time to do this one thing because it's not going to be as quick as it was before. But when we're transparent, we set an expectation, so now people aren't making assumptions, or they don't feel like they're not being told the full truth. So anything that we do know, let's share it, the good and the bad. Let's be very proactive with what to expect. We should also anticipate questions and resistance. So something I really like to encourage is if you have a few change champions in your organization, people that you know from your experience, hey, they tend to adapt really quickly. They tend to be very forward thinking. They tend to be drivers when it comes to change. Maybe, get their ear a little bit. Hey, what challenges should I anticipate? What are some questions you're already hearing? What are some things that we need to be prepared to answer? That way you can get ahead of it a little bit, knowing that there will be pushback from some people. I think number 3 is extremely important, especially as you talk about making sure everybody's communicating the same message. One of the fastest ways to hurt your change initiative is when it becomes us versus them. So what we don't want is a frontline manager saying, hey, I'm with you. I think this stinks. I think it's stupid, but we're being told we have to do it. Right there, we've kind of broken that change initiative, because now that frontline employee goes, oh, my boss isn't even bought in. Why should I care? Why should I put in the effort? So that's why if a frontline manager isn't bought in, we have to have those conversations. We have to make sure that we can address concerns, we can overcome objections, we can talk through the pain points, and do that with the leadership team frequently first, so that if there is concern or disagreement, we can vet that out ahead of time. And that's a big one, because this is probably one where I've seen a lot of change initiatives fail, is kind of that us versus them mentality. We already talked about the importance of explaining the why, not just the what, and then really tailoring the message to the team. So this goes back to a frontline manager having that dialogue. How is this particular change going to impact our team? Because how it impacts finance may be very different than how it impacts production or how it impacts sales. So that awareness of how is this really going to impact the different parts of the business is also really important, so that people feel like they understand, in my day-to-day and in my role, I know what to expect. You're going to hear me say this a couple of times. In the absence of communication, people will make up their own story. This is why change initiatives fail so frequently. And you guys mentioned it, and I've heard it many, many times. If we're only communicating a change once or twice, and I start to, get all the other noise in my head from all the other information coming at me, and I haven't heard anything in a while, people will make up their own version of what's going on. Oh, I know why no one's communicating. It's because it's not going well. Or, oh, I know why that's happening. Our brains love to fill in the gaps, and typically we go worst case scenario. So if we're not communicating frequently and consistently, people will start to fill in the gaps themselves. And often it's a worst case scenario story. So the D of ADKAR is desire. So this is the motivation for change. So as we mentioned, that frontline supervisor is key in tapping into individual contributor motivations. So part of this is really the understanding of what's in it for me, right? What's in it for me as an employee? What can I expect to gain by implementing this change? And again, what can I expect to lose? What are those downsides that I should anticipate? I want to try to paint a picture of what life's going to look like the day after the change. So if I'm able to do my job very efficiently, and I've been doing it the same way for years, the day after we implement new software, it's going to be bumpy. But if I can walk the employee through that and tell them what to expect and say things like, hey, we're going to stay in constant communication. We're going to figure out what works and what doesn't. We're going to adapt as needed. We're going to be in this together. I want to hear from you. I want to know what's working and where the challenges are. I'm empowering that person versus them feeling like something's being done to them. So I really need to understand kind of what are the motivators, what are the things that are important to that employee. So we mentioned earlier, 37% of employees across the board are under extreme stress because of change. That's a pretty high number when we think about the impacts of stress. So the longer we stay in a high stress state, the more likely we are to move into fight or flight. And the fight or flight response is really, I'm either just going to shut down or I'm going to come kind of in that anger, aggressive mode, because my thinking brain isn't in control, my reactive brain is. So as leaders, if we can better understand which of these 5 intrinsic motivators are really kind of core for my employees, it can help me with them working through their stress and being able to manage that effectively. So the 5 key motivators, I've kind of got them here on the screen. Sometimes people are stressed around change because fear of status. Maybe they feel like it's a demotion. Maybe they feel like something's being taken away from them. That can compromise status. Certainty is a big one, fear of the unknown. And that's why we said, in the absence of information, people will make up a story. So the more I can tell them about what we know and be honest about what we don't know, the better I'm going to handle that certainty. We're not going to know everything. If we're rolling out something new, there's going to be unexpecteds. But how clearly can I communicate what I know today and the commitment to keep people informed? Autonomy is another one. So often people will dig in their heels around change when they feel like their autonomy is being taken away. So if they've always owned a certain process or owned a certain aspect of the business, and because we're implementing something new, that's being shifted, and now they have to rely on others, or they have to seek approval for things they didn't have to seek approval for before, that can actually be a stressor, because now I feel like my autonomy is compromised. Relatedness is another one. Do people feel like their group, their connected friends and colleagues and peers that maybe they've worked with for a really long time, is that being taken away, or are they being shifted to a new team? That can really cause that stress when it comes to change. And then fairness, right? Is this negatively impacting me and my department more than somebody else? So these are 5 things that are important for you to pay attention to, because if I can help reduce the stress and give clarity around these 5 things, I'm going to minimize, I'm not going to say get rid of, but minimize that anger and resistance and maybe digging my heels in that we might see otherwise. So a good technique that I'll share with you is the reframe. And you may have heard of reframing before in different scenarios, but let me just give you an example, because again, the power of you as a leader in your company, whether you're a formal leader or informal, is really significant when it comes to helping people work the change curve. So what tends to happen is we see or hear something, right? There's a change. I'm going to tell myself a story about what I think is happening. Based on the story I tell myself, I'm going to evoke emotion. And based on those emotions, I'm going to act. So I hear about a change that affects me personally. I immediately start telling myself, uh-oh, this is going to be bad. Because I'm telling myself that story, I start to get worked up. I start to have a lot of doubt. And I might say, okay, I'm digging my heels in. I'm not going to do this. This is not what I'm about. So that story that I've told myself is going to drive my feelings and my behavior. So what if we help reframe that? So we communicate a change, we give the why, not just the what, and then we help the employee. We have a conversation. Hey, let's talk about what good could come from this. Make them tell you, right? Let's think about the positives. What are some positives that we believe will come from this change? If they're really stuck, get them to reflect on a past change that initially they were worried about that turned into a really good thing, right? What's a change that's been implemented before that at first glance they were resistant, but looking back, there's tons of benefits that came from implementing that change. So sometimes the reframe is helping them reflect on a prior time when a change actually was a good thing. If I can do that, I can help shift that story to a more optimistic, hopeful story. And now they're more willing. They're more willing to get curious. They're more willing to try. So if we go back to what I said earlier, in the absence of communication, people will make up their own story. That's why we said the awareness piece is so critical. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. If I don't do that, then I can pretty much ensure that employee is going to fill in their own story. And that story will likely be based on a negative past experience. So the more I can, in my one-on-ones, in my conversations with my team, help reframe that story to what's the good that can come from this. Let's shift the thinking here and focus on some positives. We're going to acknowledge the challenges, but let's really get people in the mindset of how can this actually help you do your job better, make more money, be more efficient, be more joyful, have less customer complaints, whatever that might be. So remember, we said there's 5 key motivators, and we said certainty was one, right? This is a big fear factor for people, is the fear of the unknown. So if we're going to implement new software to help us do our jobs more effectively, someone's initial reaction might be, no, right? I've just gone through change. I just learned something new. This is overwhelming. Everything's changing. They're going to feel anxious and overwhelmed. And again, this is where they can either get to that anger, resistant, depression phase of the curve and stay there. That's how people get stuck. But again, if I, as the leader, reframe the story, I can help them work through that uncertainty. And the way I do that is, hey, let's talk again about what we know to be true. Here's what to expect. Here's what we don't yet know, but here's my commitment on when I'm going to circle back with you on this. I want your input. Let's check in every week. How's it going? What's working? Where are you getting stuck? These conversations take time. And I think a lot of times that's why we don't do them as frequently as we should, because we get caught up in the whirlwind of the day-to-day and we go, oh, we talked about it last week, or we talked about it, a month ago. But man, it's this constant communication, and we just work it into our normal one-on-ones or our normal employee conversations, and it just becomes part of our communication cadence. That's how we just make it a rhythm of how we operate. And then people have a system to work through that change more effectively. So if I was reframing this to help with certainty, I might say, hey, Lisa, let me explain again why this software is critical, why we're doing this now. Here's our plan. Here's a plan to help you. Tell me, what concerns do you have? How can I help you work through those? So again, the more I can have those conversations early and often, the less likely we are to have storytelling ensue and people basically going worst case scenario and then getting other people worked up about it, because we've all seen that happen. So as leaders, the story that you tell through your actions, your behavior, and your process is key. So our employees are always watching us to say, are things in alignment? It's congruence. Do my words line up with my actions? Do my words and actions line up with my processes? So for example, if I tell people, no, we're doing this change, it needs to be done this way, but then I still do it the old way, there's a disconnect. Or if I do it the new way and I tell people we're going to do it the new way, but I still allow the old way, there's a disconnect. Or I'm doing it the new way, everybody on my team's doing it the new way, but I am in the hallway talking about how much I hate the new way, there's a disconnect. So as leaders, formal or informal, this needs to be in congruence. If people can find a loophole, they will. But if they see my boss's actions and words and processes all line up, they're more likely to get on board because they see you walking the talk as well. So those are kind of the 2 big things that I wanted to cover today, was awareness and desire. Let me just touch on the K, the A, and the R, just so you can kind of get a sense of the whole model. So once we have awareness and desire, I've done a good job of communicating the why. I'm talking to team about their motivators. We've got clarity of kind of what's working and what's not. We've got 2-way dialogue and feedback going on. I also have to make sure that we get them the knowledge to do whatever this new thing is that we're implementing. So this is the training piece. And as we talked about before, if I jump too soon to the training piece and I haven't done awareness and desire, this is likely to fall flat. People won't be invested, they won't take it seriously. So I need to make sure I do the A and the D first before the K. But this is really making sure we have the training and the resources so that people can do what we're asking them to do. The second A is ability. So knowledge and ability are different, as you guys know. Knowledge is the training. Ability is actually using what they learned. So a couple key things here. If I give people the training and I give them the knowledge to do the new thing, whatever the change is, I need to make sure that I'm also coaching and giving feedback. One of the best ways to get people kind of out of that curiosity phase into acceptance is to catch them doing something right. Celebrate the small wins, right? If they make a mistake, don't make it a huge deal. Learn from it. Let's learn from it. Let's talk about it. Let's move on. But if I'm not coaching and providing feedback, people aren't going to know if they're doing it right, and they will lose motivation if they feel like no one's watching and no one cares. So I need to do a lot of that positive reinforcement. I also need to remove any obstacles. So this is what I mentioned earlier. If we're still allowing the old way, that's a huge barrier. I may have gotten training on the new way, but if I'm still allowed to do it the old way, my default behavior is going to go back to that because it's easy and I don't have to think about it. So removing any obstacles that can prevent us from adopting the change. That's also a big part of ability. And then the R is reinforcement. So now we have people, they understand the why, we've tapped into the motivators, they have the training that they need, we've removed the obstacles. How do we reinforce and keep things going? Well, celebrating the wins is huge. Publicizing them company-wide. Hey guys, here's an initiative we rolled out. This team's doing a fantastic job. Look at their metrics. This team over here is crushing it. Look at how we're doing. Publicizing that and getting people excited about it is a great way to continue the reinforcement. The other thing is measuring what you care about. So if there is a measurement that you can track as it relates to this change, track it, measure it, publicize it. People will pay attention to what they're being measured on. So if I really want to make a change stick, can I link some sort of metric or measurement or scorecard or KPI to it so that there is a carrot? I'm dangling a carrot as to the incentive of following this change as well. So here's our curve, and now I've added a couple things. So the bar across the middle there says ADKAR, A-D-K-A-R, and I have the change curve on top of it. So a couple takeaways on this slide. You can see when people are in shock and they're kind of at that first shock and denial, I have to do a good job of building awareness. 7 to 10 times, very consistent messaging, the why, not just the what. When they start to kind of slip into anger, frustration, depression, resistance, that's where that desire, tapping into the motivators. How does it affect this person? How can we make sure that they see the benefits and also are aware of the challenges? Do I know what's compromised for this person? Are they concerned about autonomy? Are they concerned about their status? The better I do at having those conversations on an individual level, the better they're going to work through that part of the curve and be willing to experiment. Now they're open-minded, they're willing. That's where we must have the right training in place to teach them how to do it. And then I am coaching and reinforcing and celebrating the small wins, which builds acceptance. And then as I see that, hey, this isn't so bad, this is actually saving me time, this is actually getting us more business, now it becomes kind of part of how I do my daily job. Again, look at the arrows. A big watch out is depending on where you're at in the organization. If you're the CEO or president and you're launching a change, you're going to know about it way before everybody else. If you're a frontline manager, you may learn about it a week before the team. And then here we're rolling this thing out, and maybe 25% of senior leadership has known about it for months, but the employee is hearing about it for the first time. So we have to remember where we're at on the curve is not necessarily where everybody else is going to be. And if I assume everybody else is already at acceptance, but really they're in shock and denial, then I'm not going to take the right approach. So I think that's another really important thing for us to keep in mind. Here's just a summary sheet. And what I really want to emphasize here is the what you hear. So how do you know where your employee is on the curve? You can be confident that you've done a good job with awareness when you hear your employees say, you know what, I understand why we're doing it. It doesn't mean they have to love it. And that's another thing I will say. You can still get buy-in on a change, even if people don't love it. You know, you may still hear, well, it's not what I would have done, but I get it. Okay, well, then we've done a good job of explaining the why. Not everybody's going to love every change that we make, and that's an unrealistic goal to have that as an expectation. You will know that you've built desire when you hear your employees say, you know what, I've decided to try. Like I see the cons, I see the pros, but I understand what we're doing. I understand why we're doing it. I'm willing to try. You'll know that you've done a good job with the knowledge piece when you hear your employees say, I know how to. I know how to do what I'm being asked to do. For the ability piece, they'll say things like, not only do I know how to, but I'm able to. The barriers are removed. I know what good looks like. I'm getting a lot of reinforcement from my boss. I have it down. And then that reinforcement piece is, I will continue to. So you know you're at reinforcement when it kind of now just becomes a habit. It's just what we do versus the old way. So with that, we are right on time here. We wanted to save about 15 minutes for Q&A. So with that, I would just love to open it up. Terrell or Monica, if we have any questions that I can answer just on any of the information that we covered.
Awesome, thank you, Lisa. No, this has been really great, and I love this training. I've had this before when you were at ECI, and I really appreciate it. And I believe you've also done a session of this at our Connect conference, which we have coming up at the end of next year too. So hopefully we'll see you again there. But it really does hit home for me on really how to think about what people are going through when we ask for change. One of the questions that we had come in was more along the lines of, okay, I've already, the horses already left the barn, right? We've already started implementing change, and obviously did not practice any of these things. And so my team is not along for the ride. How do I realign the team now?
Yeah, great question. And I appreciate whoever asked that question, because I think a lot of us could say the same, like, hey, we've had many situations where the horse left the barn and we're like, okay, I could have done that a little bit differently. I'm a big believer in being vulnerable and admitting, okay, maybe we could have done things differently here. Let's try to regroup. Let's try to level set. So one thing I might suggest is pulling the team together and just taking the lead to say, you know what, guys, I recognized we kind of jumped out of the chute really quickly, and I don't know that I did a wonderful job of explaining the why, and I don't know that we've really answered your questions and made sure that we're listening to your voice on this. I'd love to get everybody in a room and let's just go back through kind of why we're doing this, why it's important. I want to hear how it's going. I want to hear some of the challenges, and how can I help you implement this change more successfully. I think just taking that initiative and just being very honest and vulnerable with the team to say, hey, we probably just rushed that a little bit. Can we back up just a little bit and see if there's things we can adjust to make this a better experience?
Awesome. Okay, well, that's a great suggestion. Thank you very much. Another question that I have too that came in was, we have an OSC team, and we want to implement a chat bot on our website. So the OSC teams, I'm not sure if you're familiar, they're the ones who actually manage all the communication that comes in through our website or through a builder's website.
Okay.
Chatbot will sit then on the website and probably be that first line of defense. So when customers come in, the chatbot will answer. So a lot of these OSCs are feeling very threatened in their job, because they're now not going to be that first line of defense, if you will, on the website. The good part about having that is it frees up the team to be able to focus more on those deeper conversations and work our leads deeper versus answering basic questions, right? So there is a lot of benefit to having that. But how do we get these OSCs over their perception that this job is, or this new technology is going to threaten their job or replace them in the end, when really it will benefit them in the long run?
Yeah, well, I think what you just said was very well said. So whoever typed that in, it's having that exact conversation, because what's at fear there is job security, right? So when we go back to those intrinsic motivators, the fear is, uh-oh, I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow. So that's that certainty piece. So I think, first of all, saying the intent of this chatbot is not to replace you. The intent of this chatbot is to take some of the mundane stuff that takes up a lot of your time, is not that fulfilling, doesn't allow you to really get into deep conversations. Take that off your plate so that we can leverage and maximize your talents and your abilities of connecting with customers on a deeper level. And then I would start measuring that. Can you actually measure in some way the value, in-depth conversations that people are able to have with this chatbot, removing some of that minutia or some of that real basic initial stuff that comes in? So if there's some way to measure or track that and put those results back in front of the team, I think that would also help build confidence. But if you have somebody on the team that's already seeing the benefit, leverage them as a change champion. That would be another recommendation I would have, is find somebody that's on board, they're seeing success, they are, pushing the boundaries, they're willing to try, they have a positive attitude about it. If you can leverage that person as a change champion, often that goes even farther than you as the boss saying it, when a peer is saying, hey guys, I was skeptical too, but this thing is working so well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like that idea for sure, because there's different people adopt to technology differently. And that was sort of this next question that I have, is we have through Mark Systems, we have a product called ITK, which basically is used in the field for the superintendents to track, the work and keep their schedules up to date. And this company has a superintendent that's been on the job for over 30 years, and he knows his trades and knows how they're, operate. So he's been very reluctant to adopt ITK. So, and not only is he reluctant, but he's been sort of sabotaging the effort. So how do you deal with somebody who is like a saboteur when you're trying to implement change?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would definitely try to pull that person in one-on-one. And obviously they have a ton of experience, 30 years doing the job. I would almost take the approach of, can you use them as an insight gatherer and a person who can make recommendations on how to make the tool easier to use, but also help him or her do their job more efficiently. So if you can almost get their buy-in on, hey, what ideas do you have? And sometimes I think we have to just be really clear. We are using this tool. This is part of what we're doing. Here's why we've decided as a company that we must have this in place for the future. Instead of resisting, I'd like to bring you on almost like an internal consultant to tell us what are some things that we could do better, or what are some challenges that you anticipate, so that we can work through those together. Sometimes if you bring in that detractor one-on-one and give them a voice and let them be heard, and almost use them as a sounding board as you roll things out, that can be a helpful way to get them on board. But I think it's also just, again, making sure, are they clear with why we're doing this and how it will help us as an organization? Because if that's missing, then he or she's going to make up their own story. So I would just go back to some of that as well.
And I love that. I love bringing somebody in who you realize that they're challenging and they're expecting you to be upset and angry about them. And if you can bring them in as an advisor, or, I understand you're feeling challenged right here, let's talk about it. And you bring them in and really listen to what they have to say. I can see that being very impactful. So that's awesome.
Well, and one thing I'll add to that, Monica, the number one thing we desire as humans is to be heard. Like, that is our greatest desire. People want to know that somebody's listening, somebody cares what they have to say. So I have definitely found that, especially when you do have detractors or people that are really digging their heels in, sometimes they just want to be heard. They may feel like, hey, the ship has sailed without me and I am not heard and my 30 years doesn't matter, right? There could be some internal storytelling there. So sometimes just giving a voice can really help overcome some of those challenges.
That's awesome. Cool. And just a quick reminder, we have that side control panel over there. So if you do have questions, you can type your question down in that questions box below and I can ask it at this time. But I did want to also go back one more time to, you had talked about repetition too, and being able to really repeat a lot of times the reasons for change and kind of the mantra and that kind of stuff. Can you just explain that just a little bit more about what are some other ways to really get those messages out to your employees as you're going through this process?
Yeah. Well, I think I think a good best practice is to look at how your business flows. Where are people gathering already? Where are you having meetings already? Where are you, do you have an internal portal? Do you have a platform that you're already using for communication? It's almost a communication strategy of how do we maximize, where are people going for their information and how do we maximize our exposure in those areas? When it comes to change, people want to hear face to face. They want to hear from your lips to their ears. So I think one thing that's a huge miss is when we just send out emails and assume that's enough. So I think the first thing I would say is an email's not bad and some documentation is a good thing, but have those face-to-face conversations. And if you run a huge organization and you're like, there's no way I can meet with everybody individually, start with your senior leaders, maybe have a roundtable with them. What challenges do we anticipate? What questions do we anticipate? Then maybe cascade it down. Now let's look at mid-level managers. Let's make sure there's clarity. Let's make sure we understand the why. But really, I think the big thing there is if we don't do it enough, it will get filtered out as noise. So keep that 7 to 10 in your brain. But also, when people are fearful, when they feel like there's uncertainty, there's potentially worry of losing a job or worry of being left out, an email is not enough, right? I need that face-to-face communication. So whether you have a normal meeting or town hall with the team, or if you're going to be gathering a group for something different, carving out some time to talk about these kind of things, I think is really, really important. But just sending emails when it comes to big changes is definitely not enough because people want that face-to-face communication.
Yeah, and then probably have those questions as well.
Right.
So I'm looking at the time and we only have about 5 minutes left. So I just wanted to ask you once again, I know you started out the beginning with introducing your company and what it is you do. So, but can you talk a little bit more about that? What it is you do and how people can get a hold of you if they have any additional questions after this?
Yeah, thanks, Monica. And we will send you guys some information as well. So just some resources, just real quick before I move to my business. There's 2 handouts, actually there's 3 that Terrell and Monica are going to provide. One of them is a checklist for employees to kind of hold themselves accountable to understanding the change. And the other one is a checklist for managers, just things that we should be thinking about as it relates to implementing change. So hopefully those are helpful for you. So happy to provide those. So for my own business, if you think about the, again, people side of things versus process, my whole company is around people skills. So if you are in need of communication training, building trust, helping others with change management, how to have difficult conversations, how to hire and interview, really anything that involves people, that is my passion. And I would be honored to have a conversation with you and see if there's an opportunity to help. There is a QR code on the screen. That is my digital business card. So that has my website, my kind of PDF that explains in more detail some of the services that I offer. It also has some different packages and statistics in there. And then of course my email's there as well if I can answer any questions for you. But really just thank you so much for this opportunity, and hopefully I will get a chance to see some of you at the Connect conference or sometime in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Okay, good. I'm glad that you're coming. We hadn't had a chance to talk about that before this webinar, but I'm glad that you're going to be coming to Connect this year. And just so everybody can mark their calendars, if you're interested, our Connect conference is going to be in November in Las Vegas at the Cosmopolitan. I don't know the exact dates, but we do have a link on our website, and we'll make sure that you get a link to that also, so you can look into more information on coming to Connect in our follow-up email too. So Lisa, thank you so very much for taking the time to spend with us today. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge of change and change management with our audience and with our builders and things like that. It's definitely something that we go through quite a bit, and especially with the market the way that it is right now. We've got a lot of change going on right now, and we need our teams to be responsive and agile and being able to, kind of continue to move forward and build and try new things as we address the changes in the market and things. So
Right.
Right. Very, very much for your time today. Any last words before we say goodbye?
No, I would just encourage you guys to try some of this. If you have already implemented a change and you didn't do it, don't worry. Just regroup. You can always go back and explain the why. You can always go back and have those conversations. So don't be discouraged. If you're already kind of in the midst of a change, just embrace what can I do today and how can I implement some of this no matter where we're at in the process. So thanks so much for having me.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. And thank you, everybody. And watch out for that email. And we will be in touch. Have a great afternoon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.